صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات لا نكلف نفسا إلا وسعها أولئك أصحاب الجنة هم فيها خالدون. والذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات لا نكلف نفسا إلا وسعها أولئك أصحاب الجنة هم فيها خالدون. ونزعنا ما في صدورهم من غل تجري من تحتهم الأنهار وقالوا الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وقالوا الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله لقد جاءت رسل ربنا بالحق ونودوا أن تلكم الجنة أورثتموها بما كنتم تعملون ونادى أصحاب الجنة أصحاب النار أن قد قد وجدنا ما وعدنا ربنا حقا قد وجدنا ما وعدنا ربنا حقا فهل وجدتم ما وعد ربكم حقا قالوا نعم فأذن مؤذن بينهم اللعنة الله على الظالمين الذين يصدون عن سبيل الله ويبغونها عوجا وهم بالآخرة كافرون وبينهما حجاب وعلى الأعراف رجالا يعرفون كلا بسيماهم وعلى الأعراف رجال يعرفون كلا بسيماهم ونادوا أصحاب الجنة أن سلام عليكم لم يدخلوها وهم يطمعون وإذا صرفت أبصارهم تلقاء أصحاب النار قالوا ربنا لا تجعلنا مع القوم الظالمين ونادى أصحاب الأعراف رجالا يعرفونهم بسيماهم ونادى أصحاب الأعراف رجالا يعرفونهم بسيماهم قالوا ما أغنى عنكم جمعكم وما كنتم تستكبرون أهؤلاء الذين أقسمتم لا ينالهم الله برحمة ادخلوا الجنة لا خوف عليكم ولا أنتم تحزنون صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات.
Thank you, Brother Muhammad Ali, for the beautiful recitation. Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and thank you for coming to our Muharram lecture series entitled Islam and God Centricity, the final chapter. This year's lecture series is sponsored on behalf of the marhumeen displayed on the TV screen outside the chapel. Can we please recite a Surah Fatiha for these and all other marhumeen? So just a quick health and safety note, in case of any emergency, the fire exits are located at the back of the chapel, the main entrance outside the chapel, and the double doors by the dining room. Can I also request everyone to keep their face masks on at all times during the program and maintain social distancing. We will be having a Q&A session with Shaykh Arif tonight and tomorrow evening after the lecture. If you have any questions arising from the lecture series, you can send them via www.shaykharif.com/live. That's SHAYKHARIF. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Shaykh Arif to deliver tonight's lecture. Can I request you all to recite Salawat, and move forward as much as possible. Thank you.
رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين شفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين وأصحابه المنتجبين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى قيام يوم الدين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمسابنا بأبي عبد الله الحسين عليه الصلاة والسلام. The central message of the Quran is for us to refine our humanity, to become liberated in our minds, to achieve the purpose of our existence on the face of this earth, to explore nature and then to cause it to benefit humankind, to become stewards of God, and then to look after this beautiful earth, as was the case with the initial creation of Adam, to take care of the earth, to take care of the animals, and for humanity to represent God in their godliness and beauty that they have within themselves. Now, from today onwards, we are going to be discussing those particular attributes that we associate with the blessed prophets and by extension to the Imams. Now, these are attributes of infallibility, the knowledge of the unseen, the right to control the universe, and the right to legislate. And as a prelude to those discussions in the 4 days that are to come, without a shred of doubt, after the blessed Prophet of Islam, his family, the close family, are the most superior brand. We cannot doubt this. In the verse of Mubahila, the women were represented by Bibi Fatima, the men by Imam Ali, the children by Al-Hassan and Al-Hussein. Even though the tone of the verse is in plural, the Prophet took one man as his nafs, one woman as his women, and two as his children. So we know here that these people are spiritually supreme, incomparable, nothing can compare with them. From here we understand that they did not have a shred of doubt in the existence of God. They did not do any shirk with God. They did not have any hypocrisy within their souls. They did not have any shred of kufr or inadequacies, spiritual inadequacies within their hearts. From here we know that these are the 5 very superior people. And this is in the Quran. It's a testimony of the Quran. We don't resort to a hadith. In addition to that, we have a hadith from both sides that the Prophet has said, I leave behind the book of God and my family. So we know that as well. In addition to that, we have the testimony from our Sunni and Shia grand personalities of the time, and Sahaba and Bibi Aisha, that the Prophet said that these are my Ahlul Bayt, Ali, Fatima, Al-Hassan, Al-Hussein, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhim ajma'in. These are the 5 that we will not dispute with in terms of their spiritual, moral, virtue supremacy. It cannot be argued against them, and we can't contend against that. So now, as human beings, we need to model our lives according to the teachings of the Quran. But that has never been enough, and I acknowledge it has never been enough. We need a role model in front of us who we can emulate. The message of God was not enough. Actually, it was the exemplary nature of the blessed Prophet that drove people to his message, that he could live by that very God-centric message, and they could emulate him. Every aspect of his life is recorded, the blessed Prophet, how he ate, how many fingers he used to take a morsel, how many times he chewed his morsel. If you can imagine how finely he was studied and he was a model, he was always placed under scrutiny. Well, if you are the model for us, as the Quran states, for us to reach God and gain the hereafter, then every aspect of your life, of your deeds, is an exemplary aspect for us. As mere mortals, we are people who suffer anxiety, unsurety, skepticism, doubt, fear, defeat, flaws. Our role models have to be people who we can relate with, who we can associate with. If somebody takes birth and starts speaking in the cradle, putting life into dead veins, creating birds and fashioning them, we will say this man is beyond our reach. He is of another substance altogether. I cannot emulate such a man. If God were to have sent an angel, that angel could never have been a role model for us, for he does not eat, does not drink, does not marry, does not suffer, does not pain. I need somebody who suffers, who pains, who can make a mistake and then show me how to rectify that mistake. That would be an ideal role model, otherwise there is no role model. He is showing me that how to get up after being defeated, how to draw near to God after having a little bit of suspicion in what I am doing. He is the one that I can follow. Now the beauty about these great prophets of God and these 5 personalities is that they are of a superior brand, not by any miraculous intervention, but by their human substance, and that's what makes them great. If I were to create an artificially intelligent robot and put all the data inside the head, in the chip of the robot, and they know every piece of everything that is to be known, then that particular artificially intelligent human can never be a role model for me. I need to know how to take decisions on the basis of the weight of evidence, and need to know how to rectify myself if that decision is a wrong one. So the role model has to be somebody that resembles us, but they have done it in themselves. In the caliber of their humanity, they are so refined, given all the frailties of humanity, and yet they can overcome them through godliness and display the gems of godliness. Then that is a role model for us. Would you agree to that? Otherwise, they are no role models. They are people whose brains have been tweaked. These are robots who have been fed all the information. I need one like the Prophet who says, had I known the unseen, no evil would have befallen me. I need one like him. He doesn't know the unseen and still he behaves very righteously. Isn't that phenomenal? This is just a prelude. The Prophet is being told, we might show you what we have promised to do to them, or we may not. We may take you before that. Oh Prophet, you are left on a knife's edge. God is not telling you anything. Now you in your humanness have to demonstrate your godliness and take the right decision and live by it. Jibreel is not going to come and hold you by the hand and tell you which decision to take. It's your decision to take because you're a role model for the rest to follow. Can you not see the caliber of the Prophet? Subhanallah, without miraculous interventions, without information being fed to him on a minute basis, he takes the decisions and lives by them. Subhanallah. The Prophet, how can you even imagine what a person he is? It's to devalue the Prophet. We are devaluing the Prophet and his family by associating most of these things that we associate to them. We take them out of the folds of merit and virtues and put them as programmed beings in the hand of God. Look at how phenomenal this phenomenal Prophet of ours is. Subhanallah. Allah is saying to him, إِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ, O Muhammad, when you have decided, consult with them, take their opinion, seek the best opinion. Jibreel is not going to come and give you an opinion, it's your community that will give you the opinion. Seek the best opinion, and then when you are resolved, O Muhammad, فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ, then rely upon Allah and put your best foot forward and go. Right? They said to Muhammad Rasulullah, what is istikhara? He said, istikhara is to seek the best outcome from Allah when you decide and do it. Istikhara is this, seek the best outcome from God. It might not be the best decision, but oh Lord, I've done it for you. I seek the best outcome from you. So I say this, and this is my belief, that there is no one better after Muhammad Rasulullah than Ali, Fatima, Hassan, Hussein, and that is through the testimony of the Quran. These are the people that the Quran mentions. And the Hadith, when we corroborate it with the Quran, gives the same message. So I will say this, and this is my belief, that the 5 people are of the same substance. So Mawla Ali, Bibi Fatima, Hassan, Hussein are of the substance, whatever substance the Prophet Muhammad is of. They are of the same substance and no difference. Fine. Now we go and embark upon these discussions. So we have this issue of the qualities of the Prophet and his progeny. We start off with examining the word Imam within the Quran. Now, the audience is so naive. We feel Imam means the 12 Imams. When the Quran talks about Imams, it's nothing to do with the 12 Imams, it's to do with a host of different meanings. As a young man, I've grown up listening to this, وَكُلَّ شَيْءٍ أَحْصَيْنَاهُ فِي إِمَامٍ مُبِينٍ. And everything we have enumerated within the apparent Imam, and that Imam is Imam Ali. And Hadith tells us it's Imam Ali. This is the naivety. Let us look at the Quran. How many usages has Imam come with? The first thing is leader, by way of teaching, outlook, way of life, and as a role model. Allah says to Ibrahim, Inni ja'iluka linnasi imama. I make you an imam for mankind. And we discussed this yesterday, that Ibrahim is the only true imam of the global humanity, because all the faiths belong to Ibrahim inevitably. So Ibrahim says, وَمِن ذُرِّيَّتِي, O Lord, and what about my progeny? The verse is, قَالَ لَا يَنَالْ عَهْدِ الظَّالِمِينَ. He said, and this is a direct speech, he said, my covenant will not be attained by the oppressive souls. So we go further in the Quran. This covenant is fulfilled. وَجَعَلْنَا مِنْهُمْ أَئِمَّةً يَهْدُونَ بِأَمْرِنَا لَمَّا صَبَرُوا وَكَانُوا بِآيَاتِنَا يُوقِنُونَ in Surah Al-Anbiya. And we made from them the Imams that guide through our command after they persevered, and they were bearing surety with our signs. So Ibrahim's dua was accepted in terms of the later prophets who were made into Imams. This is what the Quran is saying. Yes? And then the word Imam as guidance is also used in terms of a book. وَمِن قَبْلِهِ كِتَابُ مُوسَى إِمَامًا وَرَحْمَةً. And before him was the book of Moses, which was an Imam and a blessing. So the book of Moses is also called an Imam, not as a physical leader, not as a virtuous example, but in terms of guidance, moral and virtuous teachings, and in terms of teaching about God. Then we have Imam being used in a righteous prayer. وَالَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ عَيْنٍ وَاجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. And those people who say, O Lord, grant us through our spouses and through our progenies the apples of our eyes. And O Lord, make us for the God-fearing an Imam. Make us Imams for the God-fearing. So here, what does this mean, this dua? Make me an Imam for the God-fearing. We can all recite this. It means, make me a person with such refined morality, spirituality and virtues that others can look up to me and follow me. But primarily it means refine me to such a depth that I can be seen as a righteous person. So Imam is used in the meaning of a prayer of refined morality and spirituality. Then Imam, the word is used as leaders that are evil. وَجَعَلْنَاهُمْ أَئِمَّةً يَدْعُونَ إِلَى النَّارِ. And we made them Imams that call upon the fire. So the leaders of hell. So until now, we have seen these verses. Imam as a leader. Imam as a prayer. Imam as a book. Imam as a righteous guide. Imam as an evil guide. Then we come to this verse that we Shias use for the sake of Imam Ali. In Surah Yasin, إِنَّا نَحْنُ نُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى وَنَكْتُبُ مَا قَدَّمُوا وَآثَارَهُمْ وَكُلَّ شَيْءٍ أَحْصَيْنَاهُ فِي إِمَامٍ مُبِينٍ. And we revive the dead, and we record what they have sent forth, and the consequences of what they have done, and everything we have gathered within an Imamun Mubin, the apparent Imam. This verse has got no bearing on any individual. This verse, and our Mufassirin will favor this opinion, that this verse means a book that records all deeds. Now why? Contrast it with the other verse. وَعِنْدَهُ مَفَاتِحُ الْغَيْبِ لَا يَعْلَمُهَا إِلَّا هُ. He has the keys to the unseen who no one knows save He. So not everybody knows the ghaib. وَيَعْلَمُ مَا فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ, and He knows what is in the land and the sea. وَمَا تَسْقُطُ مِنْ وَرَقَةٍ إِلَّا يَعْلَمُهَا, no leaf descends that save God knows it. وَلَا حَبَّ فِي ظُلُمَاتِ الْأَرْضِ, and there is no seed hidden within the depths of the earth. وَلَا رَطْبٍ وَلَا يَابِسٍ إِلَّا فِي كِتَابٍ مُبِينٍ, and nothing wet or dry but that it is all enclosed in the Kitabul Mubin. Everything is enclosed within an apparent book. We write everything and gather everything in an apparent Imam. Can you see that? So apparent book is a reality which is existential, in which everything is as it is. And Imam al-Mubin is another existential reality in which everything as it emanates and flows is being recorded in the moment. So Kitab al-Mubin is an existential reality before and prior to the world. And Imam al-Mubin is a place where everything that is happening in the world is being recorded. We can contrast this together. And of course on the day of Qiyamah, people will cry out, what is with this book? It has everything recorded inside it. It does not omit any single thing. Now here, we might ask, well, when this verse was being revealed, Imam Ali was not designated as the Imam anyway. So how can Imam Ali be Imamul Mubin? Can you see this? And this verse is talking about all the nations that have gone. Everything is being recorded in Imamul Mubin. Imam Ali has just taken birth now. The history of the world has existed prior to his birth. In any case, we have another verse that the Shia seem to think that belongs to the 12 Imams. يَوْمَ نَدْعُ كُلُّ أُنَاسٍ بِإِمَامِهِمْ, on the day we will call every group with their Imam. So here the evil people will be with their evil Imam, and the good people will be with their good Imam. So obviously every nation, the nation of Muhammad Rasulullah, will be called with Muhammad Rasulullah. Can you see that? Every nation will be called with their Imam. If that is the case, then the Sunnis will be called with Muhammad Rasulullah, the Shias will be called with Ali, and they won't be with Muhammad Rasulullah. Does that make sense to anybody? The Ismailis will be called with Hazrat Ismail, and the Ithnashris will be called with Hazrat Musa al-Kazim. But none of them will be called out with Imam Ali or the Prophet himself. How can that make sense to anybody? يَوْمَ نَدْعُ كُلُّ أُنَاسٍ بِإِمَامِهِمْ, the day in which we will call every nation with their Imam. If we are the nation of Islam, then we will be called with our Imam, which is Muhammad Rasulullah and nobody else. So we see through the examination, very cursory examination of these verses, that the word Imam in the Quran is not a direct reference to the 12 Imams. But indirectly the 12 Imams may be an extension of the word Imam. Like Ibrahim was an Imam. Like the prophets were Imams. They are Imam in that way. They guide aright through the command of God, and that's it, not Imamul Mubin or any such thing. Now we come to the meaning of ʿisma. What is ʿisma? Исма means protection. Protection from what? And I'm going to take you through the variety of views that the ulama have given. Protection from major sins. Protection from minor sins in addition to major sins. Knowingly, according to some. Absolutely, according to others. In any case, they will not commit major sins, or they will not commit major and minor sins. Some say Isma means in addition to not committing sins, these sort of people will not suffer from forgetfulness or mistakes or errors. In addition, some say only when they are ordained as prophets or imams. And others say no, an absolute maximalist interpretation that Isma from the time of birth till the time of death. So that's the maximal Isma. Not only in conveyance of the Sharia, but in every aspect of life, these people will be free of mistakes, free of errors, free of forgetfulness. They will be free of minor sins, they will be free of major sins in the entirety of their lives. If you were to say this, then the very first thing this implies is that somebody who is a Masoom has the absoluteness of knowledge in everything in order for them to never make a mistake. Because even if you don't make a mistake, but there's a better option, you have chosen a lesser option, which in comparison to the better option is a mistake nonetheless. So ʿisma in this sense preassumes absolute knowledge, and that can only be the knowledge of God. Only God can have absolute knowledge. So ʿisma, wilayah takwiniya, wilayah tashri'iyya, and ilmul ghayb are the absolute qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and nobody else can share with Him. By these type of theologies, what we are doing is actually we are attributing the specific attributes of God unconditionally to other than God. And then we are shifting Islam from God centricity into Prophet and Imam centricity, because our naive minds will conclude it. And then again you say, well, if there is absolute ʿisma, then how can you actually follow a person with absolute ʔisma and absolute knowledge? They don't become role models after that. They are incapable. In any case, the Sunnis also say that the Sahaba, and in particular the Khulafa, were fault-free. In reaction to the Shia, Sunni say this: both groups have come and they have introduced within faith to an extent that today the faith has become unrecognizable in reaction to each other. Now, some have gone as far as to say ʔisma means freedom and amnesty from physical filth as well. So you will find reports as well that the women who are masoom do not menstruate. And you will find that the birth do not take place of these grand people in a normal way, but they take birth from the thighs. You will find these sort of traditions. You will find that the Prophet's excrement smelt of perfume and they never became najis, for example, that Allah wants to keep rijs away from them. So all of these things crept in bit by bit, although alhamdulillah nowadays maybe these things are not being uttered from the pulpit, but back in the day when I was young and we used to read books and we used to hear majlises, these things used to come out. Now, what are the arguments for the maximal ʔisma? There are no arguments from the Quran. The argument is a rational one from our ulama, that if these people are to be exemplaries and role models, then by priority they cannot have any mistake or sin. Because if they have mistake and sin, then we are ordained to follow them in their mistake and sin. So we will say, can we confine it to the time of their prophethood or their imamat? No. If it is only confined to the time of the prophethood or imamat, and if it is not stretched from their birth, then anybody will say, well, hold on, you were as naughty as I was 2 years ago. How can I follow you now? It's a phenomenally good rational argument, isn't it? If somebody were to say, look, I am a prophet now, you got to follow me. I say, wait a minute, you were not such a good man 3 days ago. I mean, how did you become a prophet all of a sudden? So they're saying by virtue of this rational argument, a prophet has to be sinless, mistakeless, errorless from the time of birth in order for people to have confidence in them. Can you see that? Now, I want to go behind this rational argument, but after a little while. But first, let us go into the comparison of this theology with the Quran. Now we'll say, can they not sin? They said no, they can sin, but God wards them away from sin. Yes, there's some grace of God that surrounds them through which they do not commit any sins. So we'll say, okay, fine. So ʔisma means no sin, major or minor, no forgetfulness, no disobedience, through the entirety of the duration of their lives. Is that what the maximal ʔisma is? They will say yes. We'll say, okay, let's go to the Quran. وَلَقَدْ أَهِدْنَا إِلَىٰ آدَمَ مِنْ قَبْلُ فَنَسِيَ وَلَمْ نَجِدْ لَهُ عَزْمًا. And we made a pact with Adam from before. He forgot and we found no resolve within Adam. So the Quran is saying Adam forgot. So you will say, well, this was before prophethood. So at least admit it's not from birth. Can you see that? It's not from birth. We'll have to narrow it down then. And from after prophethood. Can you see that? Okay, let's go further. فَأَكَلَ مِنْهَا, they both ate from the fruit. وَبَدَتْ لَهُمَا سَوْآتُهُمَا, and their private parts were shown to them. وَطَفِقَ يَخْصِفَانْ عَلَيْهِمَا مِنْ وَرَقِ الْجَنَّةِ, and they both frantically began to cover their private parts with the leaves of paradise. وَعَسَى آدَمَ رَبَّهُ فَغَوَى, Adam disobeyed his Lord and was deviated. So he disobeyed his Lord. Forget about forgetfulness, and now he has disobeyed his Lord, the Quran is saying. So there is disobedience as well. Now it's actually prior to prophethood. So we'll say, okay, fine, at least admit that they can forget before prophethood, they can make mistakes and disobedience before prophethood from the light of the Quran. Anyway, we want to drive the point home. This is now the case of Nabi Musa prior to prophethood, when his Israelite sort of follower called him to help him against his enemy who was Egyptian. فَوَكَزَهُ Musa, Musa was very, very strong. So فَوَكَزَهُ Musa, Musa punched him. فَقَضَى عَلَيْهِ, he killed him. One punch and he killed him. قَالَ هَذَا مِنْ عَمَلِ الشَّيْطَانِ, Musa said, this is the deed of the devil. إِنَّهُ عَدُوٌ مُضِلٌ مُبِينٌ, he is the enemy and he is the misguider. Then he turned to God and he said, قَالَ رَبِّي إِنِّي ظَلَمْتُ نَفْسِي, O Lord, I have oppressed my soul. فَاغْفِرْ لِي, forgive me. فَغَفَرَ لَهُ, and Allah forgave him. إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ, he is most forgiving, merciful. So we will say, okay, Moses not only made a mistake, but Moses felt a sense of sin in his soul. So now we come out with this theology of Tarkul Awla. Well, Adam did not commit a sin, it was Tarkul Awla. What is Tarkul Awla? Omission of the best course of action. This thing, it doesn't exist in the Quran or anywhere. It's Tarkul Awla. Adam said, رَبَّنَا ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا, O Lord, we have oppressed our souls. Zalama means to darken the soul. Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. Darkness of the soul means movement away from God. And that is the definition of sin. Sin does not mean eating something. Sin means its effect upon the soul. These people have interpreted sin to mean what? Formal disobedience and formal obedience. Here Adam is doing formal disobedience, and he is feeling the sin in his soul. They are crying and lamenting, رَبَّنَا ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا فَإِن لَمْ تَغْفِرْ لَنَا وَتَرْحَمْنَا, if you do not forgive us and have mercy upon us, لَنَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ, we will be of the oppressed and the dimmed ones inside there. God is the light of the heavens and the earth. فَتَلَقَّى آدَمَ مِنْ رَبِّهِ كَلِمَاتٍ فَتَابَ عَلَيْهِ, Adam received words from his Lord and the Lord turned to him in tawbah. Can you see this? Adam feels a sense of sin in his soul. Musa feels a sense of sin. ظَلَمْتُ نَفْسِي, I have darkened my soul. Allah forgave him. He is Tawwabur Rahim. He is the off-turning and the most forgiving. Okay, fine. This was before his prophethood. Fine. So at least admit it's not from birth. Got it? From birth, exclude that. The Quran doesn't accept that. Now let's look at Prophet Shuaib. وَظَنُّونِ الذَّهَبَ مُغَاضِبًا فَظَنَّ أَن لَّن نَّقْدِرَ عَلَيْهِ, and Dhannun, in a rage, he left his people. And he assumed that we have no capability upon him. Dhannun assumed that we, the Quran is saying, we are not able to get him back and put him back in his community. Dhannun, this is Shuaib. فَنَادَى فِي الظُّلُمَاتِ, in the darkness he cried out, لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا أَنْتَ, there is no God but you. Subhanak, glory be to you. Inni kuntu min al-zalimin, indeed I am of the oppressive ones. Dhannun is admitting to his flaw, and he is feeling a sense of sin and distance from God. Look at the verse. فَلَوْلَا أَنَّهُ كَانَ مِنَ الْمُسَبِّحِينَ, had Dhannun not been of those who constantly supplicated and did this dua, La ilaha illa ant subhanaka inni kuntu min al-zalimin, لَلَبِثَ فِي بَطْنِهِ إِلَى يَوْمِ يُبْعَثُونَ, he would have tarried and existed and lived in the belly of that thing, whichever it was, a fish or a supernatural vessel or alien technology, whatever it was. لَلَبِثَ فِي بَطْنِهِ إِلَى يَوْمِ يُبْعَثُونَ, he would have tarried and lived in the tummy of that fish until the day of resurrection. Are you telling me Dhannun did Tarkul Awla and his punishment was to stay in there till the day of Qiyamah? Amazing, isn't it? It's such a heavy punishment. That you just went away in a rage and you will be punished like this till the day of Qiyamah, you will live in the belly of that fish. Imagine. Does it make sense? And had it not been for his tasbih was La ilaha illa ant, subhanak inni kuntu min al-zalimin. So now we go to Nabi Dawood. وَظَنَّ دَاوُودْ أَنَّمَا فَتَنَّا فَاسْتَغْفَرَ رَبَّهُ وَخَرَّ رَاكِعًا وَأَنَابَ. The two angels came to Dawood. Now read the history here. It's a very interesting history. It was actually teaching Dawood a lesson. And Dawood, by his judgment, judged against his own self. And at that point he understood, oh my God, I've done this wrong. This was wrong. It's not justifiable. And he fell into prostration or ruku and did tawbah. But it is amazing, the verses of the Quran. When it comes to the Jewish scriptures, ruku is more prominent than sajda. Why is Allah emphasizing ruku? Maybe because in their devotional prayers they've omitted ruku. So the ruku is being emphasized more and more, that these prophets used to do ruku in addition to sajda. It's amazing the way the Quran explains things. So now we say here that you have to admit that prior to prophethood, these grand beings did make mistakes. Yeah? And Tarkul Awla makes no sense. Because if it was Tarkul Awla, why would God be putting him in the belly of a fish till the day of Qiyamah? Why would they be lamenting and crying? Why would God say, I accepted his tawbah? Now, what about after prophethood? What about after prophethood? قَالَ لَا تُؤَاخِذْنِي بِمَا نَسِيتُ وَلَا تُرْهِقْنِي مِنْ أَمْرِي عُسْرًا. Moses, after prophethood, goes to Khidr. He says, yeah, teach me from what you know. He said, you can't, you don't have the patience. He says, no, teach me. They went, he broke the boat. He said, you broke the boat to drown the people. Khidr said, I told you can't bear this. You just don't have the patience. He said, Khidr, don't chastise me due to my forgetfulness. Wait a minute. This is Moses. He gave a promise to Khidr, and then he forgot about his promise and he said, why do you chastise me? I'm a grown man, don't humiliate me. I forgot. So he forgets after prophethood. So this is further chipping away at the definition of ʿisma. Now the Quran says to the Prophet, إِنَّا فَتَحْنَا لَكَ فَتْحًا مُبِينًا لَيَغْفِرَ لَكَ اللَّهُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِكَ وَمَا تَأَخَّرَ. Indeed, we have given you an open victory so that God may forgive what has preceded of your sin and what is to come. Now the Mufassirin will say, here, dhanb does not mean a sin. I will say, what about ghufran? Does it not mean forgiveness as well? Just because we don't understand the nature of sin doesn't mean that we deny it. Maybe we need to understand what sin is properly. Do you get that? Allah is saying it, وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لِذَنْبِكَ in another place. Seek forgiveness for your dhanb. If dhanb is not a sin, then why is God saying, فَاسْتَغْفِرْ, seek forgiveness? Can you see that? So now that you've interpreted this word, you'll have to interpret that word, then you have to interpret this word, then you'll have to interpret a host of other historical events. It's all based on interpretation because our theological outlook has been set. Everything else has to be interpreted bit by bit by bit by bit until a time comes when we don't follow the original teachings of the Quran, not at all. Can you see that? Instead of asking, well, what does sin mean here? Which we're going to go into. وَاذْكُرْ رَبَّكَ إِذَا نَسِيتَ. O Prophet Muhammad, remember your God when you forget. There you go. The Quran is saying when you forget. Now, when you look at the tafsir, when Surah Qiyamah was being revealed, the Prophet used to hasten. It was a Makkan surah, it appears. The Prophet used to hasten to deliver it. Why? Least he forgot. Least he forgot. The Quran intervenes, stops, pauses Surah Qiyamah. Of course, this is all a part of Surah Qiyamah, but the actual verses dealing with Qiyamah stop. And there's a personal conversation that takes place with the Prophet. لا تحرك به لسانك لتعجل به. O Muhammad, do not hasten your tongue. Do not move your tongue to hasten its deliverance. Inna alayna jam'ahu wa qur'ana. We will gather it and we will separate it. Don't worry about it. Deliver it at ease. Don't worry. It will not be forgotten. When the scribes don't write it down, we will make sure it is written down properly. So there, the Quran is talking about sin. The Quran is talking about forgetfulness. Now there is an interesting incident in the Quran. in Surah Nisa. There are 2 verses, but series of 4 verses, but 2 verses. وَمَنْ يَكْسِبْ خَطِيئَةً أَوْ إِثْمًا, a person who earns a mistake or a sin, ثُمَّ يَرْمِ بِهِ بَرِيئًا, and then charges a sinless person with it, فَقَدْ احْتَمَلَ بُهْتَانًا وَإِثْمًا مُبِينًا, he has indeed earned a big blame and a big grand sin. After that the verse says, وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكَ وَرَحْمَتُهُ, O Muhammad, had it not been for the grace of God upon you and His mercy, لَحَمَّتْ طَائِفَةٌ مِّنْهُمْ, a group of them indeed desired أَن يُضِلُّوكَ, to misguide you. وَمَا يُضِلُّونَ إِلَّا أَنفُسَهُمْ, and they do not misguide save themselves. وَمَا يَضُرُّونَكَ مِنْ شَيْءٍ, and they do not harm you in the least. What was the story here? Look at the tafsir, and especially the tafsir of Makarim Shirazi, Shaykh Makarim Shirazi. I'm not going to go through this because I do want you to go and research it. There were 3 people, they stole something from a shared house or property. Then they saw that, okay, the news of it is reaching the Prophet. So they went and planted it in a Jewish household. Then they went to a person and they said, look, go and talk with the Prophet so that we are absolved of it. And the Jewish guy is blamed. On the weight of the evidence, now as I said, go and refer to the tafsir as well, yes, and especially Makarim Shirazi, in the initial one that I read many years ago, and somebody said it's still there in the electronic version, so go and refer to it. So the Prophet, on the weight of the evidence, adjudicated that the Jewish person was wrong. It is at that point that the Quran intervenes, and the Quran says that they tried to misguide you, O Muhammad, had it not been for the grace of God upon you. So the Prophet reopens the case with the fresh evidence, re-adjudicates and frees the innocent party and charges the guilty party. From this verse we see that errors can also be made after prophethood. So we see that this notion of ʿisma is something which in its entirety requires the entirety of knowledge, and that only belongs to God. Everybody else does not appear to have ʿisma at that level, but there is a phenomenal level of ʿisma, and that is what gives them their utmost merit, and that is why they are unequaled. And we are going into that now. Look at the Imams. Rabbi zalamtu nafsi, Imam Ali says. The Prophet used to stand. He said, on my heart gathers rust, وَإِنِّي لَأَسْتَغْفِرُ اللَّهَ سَبْعِينَ مَرَّةً, and I do istighfar 70 times. O Prophet, the heart has gotten rust. You do istighfar 70 times, you haven't done a sin. The Prophet said, yes, this motion away from God is a sin in itself. Not being in the presence of God is a sin in itself. Now look at the Quran, the way it talks to the Prophet. O Prophet, do not be grieved, do not doubt, Yasin. إِنَّكَ لَمِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ عَلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. Yasin, indeed, you are a messenger. Why would God say that? Indeed you are a messenger, O Muhammad. Don't entertain any doubts about it. These human facets are seen by these grand people as sins. Oh, the prophets cry out, Mata Nasrullah, when will the help of God come? And then they feel, oh my God, how did I even doubt? How did I even doubt and despair? That is a sin. These are the sins that they felt. I know, إِنَّهُ لَيَحْزُنُكَ, I know what they are saying hurts you. يُضِيقُ بِهِ صَدْرَكَ, your heart becomes constricted. The Prophet used to feel, but how can I go through these emotions? Oh Allah, I should be with you so fully. Can you see that? These are seen as inadequacies within them. This is how the blessed Prophet and the Imams understood themselves. Imam Zainul Abidin, oh Lord, how may I stand before you seeking forgiveness when I know that I will sin again? Whatever level of sin he was feeling it. He held himself sinful. Oh Lord, forgive me, Imam Ali says, all the sins that you know of, nobody else knows of. Forgive the sins due to which calamities descend upon me. He was not teaching us, he was being very genuine, he was not being pretentious. So what is ʿisma? Now we come to these beautiful verses. It's a merit of these people, ʿisma. And it is something that we can also attain, but we will never reach the stage at which they had reached. But it's an incentive for us to try and attain. وَلَقَدْ هَمَّتْ بِهِ وَهَمَّ بِهَا لَوْلَا أَنْ رَأَى بُرْهَانَ رَبِّي كَذَلِكَ لِنَصْرِفْ عَنْهُ السُّوءَ وَالْفَحْشَاءَ إِنَّهُ مِنْ عِبَادِنَا الْمُخْلَصِينَ. She made advances to him. He too would have responded to her advances had he not seen our signs. There is no question of a divine hand removing him. Can you see that? The divinity only showed him the sign. The rest was upon Yusuf to become mindful and remove himself from that predicament. It was the great merit of Yusuf. His godliness, his sense of piety, God-focusedness and presence of God that removed him. He would have indeed given in to her advances had he not seen our signs. He would have indeed given in to her advances means what? That there was no magical hand moving him away. It was his own doing. Can you see that? Nobody is free from the threat of error and sin. Surah Al-Anbiya says, Ibadullah al-Mukramun. These are the noble creatures of God. They will not precede God in speech. And if any one of them says that I am God other than God, we will drown them in the pits of hell. Why even say that in the verse? Ibadullah al-Mukramun, they are such noble creatures. These other worldly creatures, even they have the propensity of sinning. God is the most perfect and the only perfect. Nobody other than God can be perfect, especially not in the bodily realm. The body cannot allow for perfection. It is wrong. If we became perfect, there would be no journey of life left. Sin is a motivation for us to perfect ourselves. Sin are inner awakeners. For the muttaqi, the Prophet said that sin after which reform ensues is better than that good deed after which conceit comes about. Because sin is a motivator towards piety. Look at another verse. قال ربي السجن أحب إلي مما يدعونني إليه وإلا تصرف عني كيدهن أصب إليهن وأكن من الجاهلين. So Zulaykha said to her, friends, that if he does not give in to me, I will make sure he's imprisoned. Joseph prayed. He said, Oh Allah, prison is better for me than what these women are calling me to do. Oh Lord, if you do not ward their evil away from me, I will relent. I will give in to them and I will become one of the ignorant people. Joseph is saying, Oh Lord, beyond this I have no control, help me out. Can you see this? This is a mark of the great piety of Joseph. So infallibility actually means that beautiful piety that these people had, which then drove them towards godliness. But it does not mean that they were miraculously protected by God or anybody else. And this is what makes them into the phenomenal role models that we see. Now I want to complete this by saying that Allah only stipulates one criteria for supremacy. إِنَّمَا أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. The most noble of you in the sight of God is the one who most guards. It is this aspect of guarding that they showed us. How to lead a normal human life in which you have the opportunity to cheat and lie, in which you have an opportunity to swear, to make mistakes, but you hold yourself together, as difficult as it may be, and you grow through that difficult situation. And if you feel within yourself that you have been less than adequate, then turn to God and refine your character. But if this issue is not understood accurately, then we get the spin-offs. What is the spin-off? So we hear many of the scholars saying that the wali al-faqih has to be a minor ma'asum. They're not major ma'asum, they have to be minor ma'asum. God has guarded them all from sins. So then you can't question the judgment of wali al-faqih, for example. I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong, I'm just talking on the theoretical part of it. And then others will say that the Marajas are being advised by the 12th Imam and they are near the level of ʿisma. And in the Safavid era, there was an attempt to make the Mujtahid Ma'soom. What I'm saying is that this is the tendency. If left unchecked and uncontrolled, it flows from the Prophet to the Imams to the Mujtahid to the Waliul Faqih, so on and so forth. But what happens here is that on the one hand, we lose the incentive of trying to become masoom within ourselves, because all of us are supposed to become infallible with the process of life as much as we can, because they are our role models. But the other thing that happens is that there are certain authorities that can go unquestioned altogether. Now, this is what happens. Think about this carefully. If we say Imam Sadiq is Masoom, and Masoom means one with the perfect knowledge, yes? And flawless. And Imam Sadiq has said that each step you take, Imam Bakir, to go for the ziyarah of Imam Hussein is worth 1,000 Hajj and Umrah and Jihad with Rasulullah, then immediately the mind will not give itself the right to critique. He is a Masoom. He has fullness of knowledge. He is saying it on behalf of God. God Himself is saying it. The Hajj belongs to God. Imam Hussein belongs to God. Who are we to tell God what is better and what is not better, what to give us thawab on? But on the other hand, if we say, no, wait. This hadith does not make sense. Imam Sadiq has not said it. And now if Imam Sadiq has said it, then has he said it in a particular context in which he wanted to shape the minds of his followers in a particular way? Can you see that? But if we were to say, no, a Masoom has said it and Masoom means this, then the mind will not even dare approach a rational inquiry. So if a Mujtahid says, I'm not trying to dig at anybody, I'm just trying to point out what's happened in our community, that those who followed the Mujtahid before me have to follow that Mujtahid, and those who follow me have to follow me. The Mujtahid before me says today is Eid, let them do it today. And their children who are following me, I say it's tomorrow, they have to do it tomorrow. Can you see this? There is no question of questioning anymore. It is these things that are in our minds that we can't question. Even if it is irrational, totally irrational, they are coming with a seal of approval from ʿisma, or sort of ʿisma, or minor ʿisma, whatever. And if they are saying it, God is saying it. And if God is not saying it, then God will judge them. This is the knock-on effect. And the community has unfortunately been nurtured through these theologies. We come to our blessed Imam Hussein. When the troops were gathering in Karbala, we read this. Lady Zainab comes to Imam Hussein, she says, oh brother, my heart feels anxiety. Do you not have anyone you can call on to assist you and help you? He said, oh sister, who may I call? In this desert, in this jungle. She said, oh Hussein, what about your friend Habib? Hussein smiled. He wrote a letter and dispatched it to Habib. Now I'm going to narrate what the Dhakirin narrate. Habib was in his house with his wife, and he heard a knock at the door. He asked who, and the response came, the messenger of Hussein. Habib rushed to the door, opened it, took the letter, put it to his chest and kissed it. He read the content of the letter from Hussein, the son of Ali, to Habib, the son of Mudahir. O Habib, you are indeed a jurist, a scholar. I am trapped amidst my enemies. Do not value your life above my life and come to my assistance. Habib comes inside. His wife says, oh Habib, who was it? The Qasid of Hussein. What did he want? Hussein is trapped. He needs my assistance. Will you go? Habib pauses and says to her, but what will become of you? She says, sorrow be your lot, O Habib. Are you worried about your wife and the son of the Prophet is going to die? Make haste and go to him. Habib comes out into the streets of Kufa. He finds Muslim ibn Awsaja. He says, Muslim, do you not know that Hussein is in Karbala and he's been trapped? Muslim had bought some dye for his hair. He threw it. He said, by God, I will color my white beard with the blood that I give for Hussein. Now look at this Muslim ibn Awsaja. When Muslim fell from his steed, Habib and Hussein rushed to him. Hussein carries Muslim in his lap. Habib says to Muslim, "Oh Muslim, do you have any final request? Even though I know that I'm soon to join you." Muslim raises his trembling hand and points at Hussein and says, "Oh Habib, save this man with your life for as long as you breathe." This was Muslim. Habib makes way towards Karbala. Imam Hussein prepares standards. He distributes them, but keeps one for himself. They say, "For who is the standard, O Hussein?" He said, "The bearer of the standard is on his way." No sooner had Hussein said this, that they saw the dust rising from the galloping hooves of a horse. Hussein said, "This is the bearer of the standard." As the dust settled, they saw Habib coming towards Hussein. Habib looked at Hussein and said, "Oh Hussein, even though I have become old, as soon as I look at you, youthfulness flows within my veins once again." There was commotion and joy in the camp of Hussein. Zainab said, "What be the cause of this joy?" They said, "Habib, the friend of Hussein, has come for his help." She said, "Send my salam to Habib." When the salam was received, he descended from his horse and placed his head in his lap and cried out, "Oh for the sorrow, oh for the destitution, that Zainab is in this state." The day of Ashura begins. The fight commences. Habib is next to Hussein throughout the journey, throughout the battle. The time of Adhan sets in. Hajjaj bin Masruq says, "Oh Hussein, it is time for Dhuhr. I know they will not give us respite. I will stand before you. Pray behind me." Hussein said, "May Allah make you of the namazi and the people who uphold prayer and raise you with them. You have reminded me of prayer. Ask them to give us respite." Habib asked, they said, "No matter how many prayers you pray, God will not accept it from you." Habib said, "And they will accept it, God will accept it from you and not from the grandson of the Prophet?" He came to Hussein and said, "Oh Hussein, I know the time for prayer has come, but I wish to pray this prayer behind Muhammad Rasulullah in paradise. Allow me to go and give my life." Hussein said, "Oh Habib, then be it." Habib comes into the battlefield. He cries out, "Oh cowards, oh people. If we had been half of your numbers, we would have vanquished you. How dare you detain the grandson of the Prophet and deprive him of water? Fight me before you reach him." Imam Hussein looked on at Habib. Habib fought gallantly. A sword descends upon the head of Habib. Habib loses his balance and a spear enters into his chest. As he descends upon the earth, another sword descends upon him. He begins to tremble and says, "Oh Hussein, come to me." Hamid ibn Muslim says, "For the first time on the day of Ashura, I saw defeat on the face of Hussein." Hussein runs to Habib. He says, "Oh Habib, shall you leave your friend?" Habib smiled. He says, "Your grandfather calls on to you, O Hussein." ألا لعنة الله القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. ماتم حسين.
یا حسین 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 یا حسین. یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا شبیر اگر سر نہ کٹاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا. شبیر اگر سر نہ کٹاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا. شبیر اگر سر نہ کٹاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا. ماتم سے منہ نہ پھیرو ارے او نمازیوں. شبیر جو سجدہ نہ بچاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا. شبیر اگر سر نہ کٹاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا. شبیر اگر سر نہ کٹاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا. شبیر اگر سر نہ کٹاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا. سجدے میں پڑے ایسے کہ پھر سر نہ اٹھایا. نیزے پہ چڑھ کے شاہ نے قرآن سنایا. اکبر نے دی اذان جو صبح عاشور کو. شکل نبی اذان سناتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا. شبیر اگر سر نہ کٹاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا. شبیر اگر سر نہ کٹاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا. سجدے میں پڑے ایسے کہ پھر سر نہ اٹھایا. نیزے پہ چڑھ کے شاہ نے قرآن سنایا. اکبر نے دی اذان جو صبح کو. شکل نبی اذان سناتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا. شبیر اگر سر نہ کٹاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا. شبیر اگر سر نہ کٹاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا. زینب نے خود اجڑ کے دی کو بچا لیا. چادر لٹی تو خاک قبر کا بنا لیا. زخموں سے چور لے کے اسیروں کا قافلہ. سجاد اگر شام نہ جاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا. شبیر اگر سر نہ کٹاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا. شبیر اگر سر نہ کٹاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا. زینب نے خود اجڑ کے دی کو بچا لیا. چادر لٹی تو خاک قبر کا بنا لیا. زخموں سے چور لے کے اسیروں کا قافلہ. سجاد اگر شام نہ جاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا، شبیر اگر سر نہ کٹاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا، شبیر اگر سر نہ کٹاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا، شبیر اگر سر نہ کٹاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا۔ سجاد یہ کہتے تھے تم مجھ کو سزا دو، یہ زہرا کی ہے لاڈلی زینب کو ردا دو، بازاروں میں درباروں میں ناموس محمد، صدمے اگر نہ جہاں پہ اٹھاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا، شبیر اگر سر نہ کٹاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا، شبیر اگر سر نہ کٹاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا۔ سجاد یہ کہتے تھے تم مجھ کو سزا دو، یہ زہرا کی ہے لاڈلی زینب کو ردا دو، بازاروں میں درباروں میں ناموس محمد، صدمے اگر نہ جہاں پہ اٹھاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا، شبیر اگر سر نہ کٹاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا، شبیر اگر سر نہ کٹاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا۔ ماتم سے منہ نہ پھیرو ارے او نمازیوں، شبیر جو سجدہ نہ بچاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا، شبیر اگر سر نہ کٹاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا، شبیر اگر سر نہ کٹاتے تو یہ اسلام نہ ہوتا۔
رحم اللہ من قرأ الفاتحہ۔ السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين وابن سيد الوصيين، السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء وبعيد المدى، السلطان أبا الحسن مولانا علي بن موسى الرضا، كن شفيعنا وشفيع والدينا في يوم الجزاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب العصر والزمان، السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان، السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
If everyone could just take a seat now, as we'll be having the Q&A session with Shaykh Arif. If you do have any questions to ask Shaykh, then you can send them via www.shaykharif.com/live. Okay, if we can have a bit of silence, we're going to start the Q&A now. Okay. So the first question that we've received is, can you tell us which Imam had named their children Abu Bakr, Umar, Aisha and Muawiyah?
So I said from the first lecture that there would be a shock if we learned that our Imams named their children Abu Bakr, Umar and so on. So I said, and may have named Muawiyah. So let me explain that. Imam Ali's son, Hazrat Abbas's brother, was Uthman. Imam Hassan's son, Abu Bakr, and another one, Umar. And I believe the 7th Imam and the 8th Imam named their daughters Aisha. Now, I speculated about Muawiyah because I can't remember properly. That was many years ago I read this text. But the Sahabi of the Imams had named their children Muawiyah. So I was speculating whether I'm remembering accurate or not, if the Imams had also or not, and that's why I said maybe. So if they haven't, then they haven't, but I still have to, if I get time, go and look at it again and see if there is. But that was a speculation. I said maybe, as far as Muawiyah was concerned. But Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Aisha, these are there.
So the next question we have is, if we reject narrations that we find illogical or unacceptable, do we not then have to also reject the narrations we like to be epistemologically consistent? And based on that, should we put the tragedy of Karbala in the annals of history?
So, I'm not talking about picking and choosing what to reject, what not to. I'm saying there has to be a methodology in order to ascertain. So I have never said only rationality. I said consistency with the Quran, and in addition to that, rationality. So both of these factors going together, consistency with the Quran and rationality. Because if something is irrational, the human being would not adhere to it, because Quran itself was subject to rational inquiry. So similarly, the Hadith literature will be subject to rational inquiry. Why did I say this? Because what's happening is that we get very strong ahadith. Now, we say, well, this hadith is going against the Quran. So the rebuttal there is, but the Quran gives hadith that authority above itself. How? مَا أَتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوا وَمَا نَهَاكُمْ عَنْهُ فَانْتَهُوا. Whatever the Prophet gives you, take, and whatever the Prophet prevents you from, leave it aside. So based on this sort of verse, you say, well, the Prophet has the utmost right, and so do the Imams, to then say things which are inconsistent with the Quran. So here I'm saying, well, no, in addition to the Quran, there has to be rationality as well, because we have never found the Prophet saying anything that goes against the Quran. In fact, the Prophet said, whatever I say, reason it against the Quran. Yes? And that's why I introduced rationality in there. So now, if the hadith says that go and curse somebody and swear at somebody and accuse them falsely, that's what the hadith says. It's a sahih hadith, right? The ulama say this is sahih in the ziyarat and whatnot, and we have so many hadith. Now here you will say, isn't this against the Quran? Isn't this against the Quran? They will say, yeah, it's against the Quran, but it's a hadith. And it's a strong hadith. What do we do? It is here that I tell them, now use rationality as well. Do you think a noble creature like the Prophet or a noble creature like an Imam would ask you to accuse people, to swear at them and to curse at them? Use your reason. Imam Ali said to his people, don't swear at the people who deserved swearing. Muawiyah's army were worthy of swears. Imam Ali said, don't swear at them. So I said, here, use reason. That's the way I was talking about reason and revelation. Now, I also stated in that lecture that there have to be different methods to ascertain the validity of different ahadith. My own method is form and essence. Yes? So when you get diverse ahadith, don't reject them on the basis of their strength or weakness. Contrast them against each other and try and extrapolate the essence of it and then contrast it against the Quran. So use reason, use a variety of methods and then contrast. Well, as far as the theological hadith are concerned, anything that moves you away from God centricity has to be checked. That is a different method. So, for example, theological, spiritual literature have to have a different standard. Jurisprudential ones have to have a different standard. So that is what I committed myself to. So we just don't drop anything that we don't like. As far as Hussein ibn Ali is concerned, Salamullah alayhi, yes. A lot of the detail we don't know. And that's why I qualify myself by saying these are popular narrations. Now, why do I say that? Because I do feel that it's a very emotional event. And if we were to just to stick to the dry narrative, it will not do justice. Imam Hussein as a human being did feel pain and anguish. And there is nothing wrong in narrating that pain and anguish. That is my justification. If I'm wrong, I am here to be enlightened.
So the next question we have is, how do you justify narrating traditions such as the Masa'ib, in which you mentioned that this will be the place where he will be martyred and the women will be taken captive? Did Imam know he was going to be killed here, and if not, why narrate this story?
So I will explain tomorrow that yes, the Prophet and the Imams and other than the Imams do have ilmul ghaib in terms of the future occurrences. I have seen no problem in that. As I said today, they are masoom, but masoom in a far more profound sense as opposed to God programming them. They have ilmul ghaib in a far more profound sense than in the way, naive way we have understood that God has just put all knowledge in their heads, right? So yes, but I did qualify myself and I said it's a popular narration. Yeah? And I like to express the sentiment. But if it comes to did the Imam know, yes, possibly he did. But that particular knowledge does not take away from what I'll explain tomorrow. The finality of the knowledge belongs with God. Even though the Imam, for example, Imam Ali was going to the Masjid of Kufa and he said to Imam Hassan, according to this narration, that I have seen a dream and Jibreel came and he banged two rocks together and it crumbled and specks of it fell on every household. Imam Hassan said, what does that mean? He said, I'll be assassinated tonight and every household will grieve. So Imam Hassan said, then why do you go? Imam Ali said, وَلَا تَدْرِي نَفْسٌ فِي أَيِّ أَرْضٍ تَمُوتُ. No soul knows which earth it is going to die in. All I know is that this is what premonition I received, and it could be tonight, but Allah can postpone or hasten or cancel His decree altogether. But He still said that, right? So it was in that sort of respect that I've said it.
So another question we've received is, we rely on the Quran as basis, but how do we know the Quran is right?
Yes, so we should go and then read the Quran and ascertain that it is right. Otherwise, we can't rely on the Quran, right? Every one of us needs to go and read the Quran and ascertain its validity. Every one of us needs to do that. Of course, God will forgive our naivety for not ascertaining it. Let's say if somebody, just doesn't say, well, how am I supposed to do this at this late age now? Fine, just be pure, good souls in there, and Allah will give paradise, because He'll give paradise to the Jews and the Christians and the Sabians and one and all on the basis of purity of heart and belief in God. But people who can need to look at the Quran and ascertain its validity for themselves. This is something that is incumbent upon us.
And the final question we have so far is, in the first lecture you made a remark to the words of the Islamic Enlightenment as a result of the Arabian Peninsula adopting La ilaha illallah. How do you explain empires and dynasties that have had similar periods of enlightenment, i.e. the Romans, Chinese empires and dynasties, without having adopted La ilaha illallah? In contrast, many Islamic countries and empires are in ruins, i.e. Iraq and Syria.
Sure. So when I said they found enlightenment, I was talking about they found enlightenment through La ilaha illallah. That does not mean anybody else can't find it. That's the first thing, right? But when you get nomadic people, who are bloodthirsty people, who are divided, and you see them contributing to a civilization on the back of La ilaha illallah, then it's true to say that La ilaha illallah made them into a civilization, right? It's true to say that That La ilaha illallah made them into a civilization. Because La ilaha illallah for them meant human rights, justice, moral values, virtues. Now, how do we talk about the modern Islamic states that are not so progressive? All I will say is that obviously we've lost the message of Islam. And now why is West so much more righteous, adhering to human rights? They talk about, morality. I'll say because they have found that God deep within themselves, and He speaks through them, through their moral language. It's down to La ilaha illallah again. The extent to which we find Allah, we progress. Yeah?
So thank you, Shaykh. I believe that's all the questions that we've received tonight.
Thank you.
So just a couple of final announcements. There will be a selection of the latest publications by AMI Press available for sale in the entrance foyer. Cash and card payments are accepted. You can also donate towards the Muharram lecture series and towards the Yemen Fund in the same place. Tomorrow night's program will start at 9 p.m. with namaz, Quran, lecture, matam, ziyarat, and another Q&A, ending with refreshments. Refreshments will now be served outside. Can I request everyone to make their way to the car park? But just before that, if we have a final surah Fatiha for all our marhumin, thank you.